So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario webinar. Today, we are pleased to provide a presentation on engaging conversations on elder abuse through podcasts. And I'm joined today by two individuals who are the founders and directors of the company Sheeter Company, and they will be providing more information and education around the podcast and how you can use this new innovative tool to help programming within your organizations, or just to hear the programming to learn and educate yourself about elder abuse in a different kind of format. So before we get going, I'd like to just give some brief housekeeping items, just to let you know that during the webinar, everybody will be muted. This is being recorded and will be posted on Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario's website within the next couple of days, along with any resources that are mentioned in our webinar today. We are pleased to be joined with our ASL interpreters, Danica and Sheila, today, and they will be interpreting the audio recording that's going to be played, as well as any discussions that are presented today. As my colleague Laura has put in the chat box, you can adjust your image of the screen by pulling the line across to the left to make the speakers a little larger than the PowerPoint is that you're viewing. All the speakers that aren't presenting may go turn their cameras off, but those who are speaking will have their visuals open for you to view. We will ask you to post any questions that you have in the question and answer box. And if you have any comments, we would be pleased to hear those if you put those in the chat box during the session. If you just decipher between the two, it makes it a little easier for us to follow up to make sure that your questions are answered at the end if you put them in that question box, so we don't miss them. We do value your input and questions to our speakers during the session today. And at the very end of the session, we would ask your feedback on how we did and any ideas that you have for future webinars. That would be greatly appreciated if you took 2 to 3 minutes to complete that. And just lastly, we do respect everybody's privacy and confidentiality. And if it would be we would appreciate if there are personal circumstances that individuals are experiencing for you to reach out to us directly. Our contact information will be provided at the end of the webinar to ensure that we are able to give you the personal information that you may need regarding a situation. Just respect your privacy and confidentiality during the webinar today. So before we begin, I would like to provide our land acknowledgement for our webinar today in our meeting. We acknowledge that the lands that we live on are the territorials of many nations and home to many Indigenous peoples. There is a new understanding of our interactions and engagements with this land and its peoples, and we endeavor to honor them by strengthening our relationships and responsibilities toward them. While there is important work being done by many nations and allies to ensure the continued thriving of our communities and knowledge systems, we recognize that our knowledge and way of doing things may not be the priority as we work towards a safe, abuse-free Ontario for all seniors. For those who are joining us for the first time for this webinar, I would like just to give a brief overview of our organization, Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. Our mission really is to ensure that all seniors are free from abuse and have a strong voice, feel safe and respected. And we do that through many pillars of our strategy that we implement on behalf of the Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility through the strategy to combat elder abuse, which is raising awareness, delivering education and training, and working collaboratively with our like-minded organizations on a provincial, a local, and national level, as well as sometimes internationally. And we do these education training webinars on a regular basis to ensure that we give that education and outreach to our seniors, as well as providers and those working with older adults, including family members and caregivers, because we feel now is the most important time to deliver that education being that we're not able to get out to other general community events in person. So we'll be doing a number of webinars. We would encourage you to go to our website to view other upcoming webinars that we do have, and to keep engaged with our organization if you're wanting to learn more about elder abuse. We have other webinars. Today will be an overview of a program around elder abuse. If you would like more information specifically on the different forms of abuse, I'd encourage you to go to our website and look under training section, and prior webinars where we've hosted many on different topics and issues related to elder abuse prevention and intervention. So today, just to give you an idea of a flow of the presentations today, we will be having more of a discussion around the podcast and the development of the podcast through the Sheater company. There'll be audio clips that will be played, so you can hear a bit of the clips from the different vignettes that have been put together, and we'll have a great opportunity to have discussions with our speaker panel today. So just to begin, we were joined today by Joan Chandler, who's the director, producer, writer, and facilitator, and the founding artistic director of Sheater. Joan's unique specialty in community arts for social change, and specifically interactive forum theater productions about social issues and works that celebrate community and that creative spirit. Joan has a keen ability to work with groups, collaboratively spinning new plays with, by, and about ordinary people to tell the authentic and galvanizing stories. She's an award-winning script writer. She's produced and co-facilitated the creation of 115 plays across Ontario and abroad, reaching audiences of over 150,000 people, primary to underserved audience in rural and small urban environments. So we're pleased that Joan's able to join us today. And with her is her colleague, David Sarita, who is also the artistic associate and co-producer of Sheater. He's also a singer, a songwriter, and pianist and composer. He has a distinct role in music and theater in Canada. He has recorded albums and his original songs, written and directed musicals, and performed in concerts and festivals across Canada and the US. He is an associate artist with the community and arts company Sheater. He's produced over 40 stray dogs salons in Toronto and Owen Sound, exuberant thematical cabarets that bring together musicians, writers, playwrights, and dancers. He leads a choral workshops, song circles, where community singers learn and sing songs through call and response. He has a long artistic history with novelist and poet Anne Michaels, including 3 recent productions at the Toronto International Festival of Authors. He finds inspiration in the wonders of every day and received the Ontario Arts Council grant to compose songs about living in the storm of the world. David lives in the Grey County, Ontario, close to George Bay, and I'm so pleased that they are here to join us today to introduce you to Sheater and the work that they've been doing to address the issue of this serious issue around elder abuse, and to get the message across that everyone has a role to play in combating elder abuse. So David and Joan, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your kind words, Rianne. That's very kind. David, are you here?
I am.
Excellent. Good. Always good to know that you're not alone on one of these. Sheater. So you can advance the slide there if you wouldn't mind. Or actually, you know what? Turn the PowerPoint off for a little bit, and I'll tell you when to put it back on. That's good. Sheater is a community engaged arts organization. And we've been working for 35 years, primarily with people in rural and small urban areas. And what we do is we bring professional artists to work with people in community and hear their stories about things that are really important to them, things that they have a stake in. And together we create artistic expressions of those particular stories and issues and bring that to the community so that it generates discussion about the topics and does so in an entertaining way. David.
Sure, and it's not just theater. It could be visual art, it could be poetry, it could be music, songwriting. But the idea is that we're working with individuals in the community and bringing our expertise as artists and combining that with the community's expertise in what's it like to be a member in this community, what's bugging us, what are we excited about, what do we need to change. And so that combination of what we do with the community creates original work. So although there are many community theaters in rural and small towns, there are not a lot of community engaged arts groups that do original work in rural settings or small towns in Canada. So we're kind of unique.
Quite unique, really. So when we present it to the community, we always, when we're dealing with issues that have some, like elder abuse, for example, we make sure that we partner with community organizations whose expertise is in providing services to people who experience that. So we have people with lived experience, we have artists, and we have community resource people working together on these projects. It is not a good idea to come in with a really tough play and just not talk about the issues afterwards. And if we're going to talk about them, if we're going to really dig into it, then we need to have people there who know a lot about it. So in this case, we will partner with people who are in, who work in violence prevention, people who are financial planners or credit counselors, the police, clergy. A lot of different people are in contact with those in the community who may be experiencing any particular high-risk social issue. The idea is that we want to nurture a sense of community, to really make sure that the people who are participating in the creation of a piece feel that it is safe, feel that they've got people around them who know what it's like. They're not alone. And that really helps to open conversations. And it really helps when we begin to create art. So we go through it in a rather step-by-step formula toward the creation of the play, and then we present it to the community that is the peer community of those who created it. David.
I'm not sure where we go next.
Okay,
well,
shooter.
and in cases where where it's not a specific issue to, let's say, where we are in Grey and Bruce counties, and if people are mobile, then we tour what we do. So because elder abuse is not confined to any one region, as we know, it's a topic that has interest for neighboring communities, and so that's what we did. Our senior actors, when we did the live show, went on the road and presented it to seniors centers, in churches, in halls, and whenever we presented the show, we gave out information about where to go for help, what the resources were in that community, and ideally we would have somebody from that community present at the show to field questions, any questions and answers, or help to direct people if they needed help.
So what we have seen over the last 36 years is that these plays really do touch people, and and that there is change that occurs with a show that we do about dating violence and sexual assault for youth that we have been touring since 2006, except not right now. There was a study done on that, and they found that, in fact, having the students participate in an educational event in the classroom before the show, watching the show and participating in an interactive way there, then talking with counselors from the community who work in violence against women, and then going back to the classroom and having a chat following that. That when they went through that process, they discovered that it did improve the youth's resiliency, and it equipped them with improved knowledge of the community resources that existed, and increased their understanding of gender-based violence as a whole. And in fact, Sheater was one of only 11 organizations in Ontario to participate in an Ontario-wide program called Creative Engagement Fund to Stop Sexual Violence between 2016 to 2019. As David said, what we do is really quite unique. It doesn't exist in very many rural communities in Canada, and there are very limited resources like this, even in urban centers. We really have seen, and we believe in the power of theater and the arts as a whole to change lives and to contribute to a healthy and compassionate society. And everything that we do seems to bring that home. So we're going to talk to you today about You Cannot Throw Your Granny Off a Bus. What a funny title for a show about elder abuse. We'll come back to why we named it that in a minute. But before we do a show, we make sure that we know, what are we talking about? And those experts help us out. But what do we know about elder abuse? You people know something about that already, but I just want to touch on it right now. So what we do know about elder abuse is that it's a single or repeated act or a lack of action that's appropriate that will cause harm or distress to an older person. And that occurs within a relationship where there's an expectation of trust. And that can happen in a variety of ways. Elder abuse is so layered. There's not one thing you can point to, right? It's not like, oh, this is elder abuse. No, it touches on so many parts of the human experience. So it could be physical, it is emotional, sexual, financial, abandonment, neglect, and self-neglect. And I think the stats say that 1 out of 6 older adults who are over the age of 60 in Canada have experienced one of those forms of elder abuse. When we, as David mentioned, we were touring live with You Cannot Throw Your Granny Off a Bus before the pandemic. And it was really having an impact. People were accessing resources. And then we stopped touring. But what happened once COVID hit was that the reported experiences of elder abuse went up, and it went up radically. The safety line was flooded with calls, and in any kind of abuse that was reported, there's one statistic that says it's gone up over 83%. With physical abuse, it's that particular study said physical abuse went up 237% once the pandemic hit. Financial abuse, 114% increase. We don't really know what the baseline was because the reporting of elder abuse is, people don't often report that for a lot of reasons. So it was really clear that the work that we were doing in communities to bring to help people to talk about elder abuse in the open through artistic means. It's not like I'm talking about Mary and what happened to Mary. We can objectively talk about what happens in the play. Oh, this is happening to Mickey. Ah, this is what Mary Beth could be doing. These are the resources she could access. Oh, Charlie needs help. This is what could be done. So it makes it objective and more possible to talk about these issues. And once the pandemic hit, how are we going to do that within theater? Our services, because they are entertaining, yeah, that's the right word, they are entertaining, can really help people to discuss the issues that are happening with them, with their friends, their family, and to connect, to make those connections, which is really, really important in the work we do, to make connections with the resources that existed. So our goal was to get people talking about the issue, and it works. So when we create a play, we'll just go through a little bit about how we do that. Can you pull up a slide for us there, please, Rianne? When we start to create a play about a serious issue, we don't just leap in and start talking about that issue. We bring the group together so that they can become comfortable with each other. How do we do that, David?
We play games. And often, if you have somebody, let's say here we are in the Bruce County Museum and Cultural Center, if you have somebody walking by the room, at the break time, they'll say, "My gosh, you sounded like you were having so much fun in there. People were singing, people were laughing. I thought that this was a show about dementia. What's going on?" So you do have to have fun, and you have to kind of work together, and playing games gets your creative juices flowing. So Joan has a wonderful array of games that she unleashes on people, which breaks down breaks down barriers, and often you've got people from disparate parts of the community that are coming together for the first time. So how do you do that? Well, we play together. By playing together, often some themes start to be introduced into the games, and we often do games that have no sound. So we see the shapes of people's bodies telling a story. And before we even start discussing the issues, we try to embody them. So it's an exciting, it's a fun process. And for me as a singer and a songwriter, my role is also to help people use their voice, not just in the sense of your physical voice, the sound that you're making, but also trust your instinct, trust your experience and your story, because that element of your story might help somebody else add with their story. And so then the play evolves from this multiplicity of participation.
I'd like to show you an image that was created when we were working on Granny. Can we go to the next slide, please? David mentions that we, work physically. So this is two of our cast members, and we said, what does elder abuse look like? And this particular kind of image came up very often. It's about physical abuse, and it's a still image here in the photograph. And that's how we begin when we're creating a play, is to work with still images. And we ask each other, what do you think is going on here? And I ask you that now, when you look at this, who do you see and what's going on? Who is the person who is being hurt? Who is the person who is hurting them? What kind of abuse is this? How does that make the person on the left feel? How does the person on the right feel? Is there anybody here who needs help? Probably both of them. Because elder abuse affects everybody. It affects family and caregivers and friends. And so we took this particular image and we developed it into a scene, step by step, exploring the character in the situation. And if we can go to the next slide, please. We end up with, here's our cast. And there are two characters that we decided were going to be the ones telling the story, and that's Doris and Fred. And they get together and they're going to meet and get back together after many years apart. They bump into each other and they begin to reminisce about friends that they had back in the day who just happen to be nearby now. And as they tell the story, Fred and Doris are the people who are like you and me in the audience, who are enjoying their lives. And then they tell a story about their friend. And here you can see in the picture with the three of them together, they're going to tell the story about the woman who in the last photograph was in fact she was the person who was the victim of elder abuse. I'm not sure what our next slide looks like. So if we can just lose the slides for a moment, Rianne, and we'll just talk some more. So that's basically how we create a show. And the shows are for people, as I said, who the peers of those who are who have created the piece. And in this case, with Granny, it was intended for rural and small community audiences. However, Granny has played to audiences in larger centers, and the same issues come up. The same things happen. There's another show that we have called Misho Minwa Noki, Yumi and Wrinkles. And the same kind of stories came up in building that show. It is a show about elder abuse in an indigenous community. That show will become a podcast soon. So, and you cannot throw your granny off a bus. We were touring. Then what happened, David?
Well, first winter happened, and we thought that the worst thing that was going to happen to us in February of last year was that we would have a couple of snow days and we would reschedule our performances and everything would be fine. And then in March, we had a blizzard of media and buzz and people talking about this new pandemic and what's going to happen. So basically, like everything, we got shut down. The province got shut down. We couldn't tour anymore. We could not take our show on the road to people because people weren't gathering and nobody wanted to travel and we weren't supposed to travel. So we hit upon the idea of adapting the live show into a podcast series where
Podcast,
each
Dave.
episode could. So a podcast, for me, basically a podcast is a radio show. That's what it is, and each episode of our podcast deals with one or two different kinds of elder abuse. So the drama that was in the live show has been translated into an audio drama. What that meant was that we could no longer do the show with 4 people because the community actors that we were working with, although very talented, were not necessarily good at creating totally different vocal characters. So our cast, I think, tripled in the making of the podcast. We brought in new seniors. We rehearsed on Zoom, and Joan rewrote the play. And so we had a way of both acting and singing the live show in a safe way and creating this podcast. What we needed to do though was how do we take care of people that are listening to the podcast? Because if we're bringing these issues up, how do we then unpack the issues if we can't have a Q&A with a live audience? How do we do that? Joan.
Well, we do that by bringing the experts together and have a conversation. Every episode deals with a particular kind of abuse. So we broke the conversation into pieces that addressed those particular kinds of abuse and invited the resource people who would normally be at a live show to come together and have that conversation and answer the questions. The conversation was recorded, and then those recordings got broken down. And after every single audio drama episode, there is a recording of the experts answering questions and talking about the issues that are in that particular episode. When somebody is listening live, listening on the podcast alone, that's what you hear. You hear the audio drama followed by the experts talking about that.
And during the podcast, and certainly at the end, we give ways that people can reach out for help. And I just saw in the chat that the senior safety line was posted. So we reference that. Often people don't know about the senior safety line. Often they don't know about the resources in their own community, which perhaps brings us to the next level of what we're doing with the podcast. So a podcast, often you would listen to it with your headphones, you would listen to it on your own. How do you reach people that are isolated and might not have a laptop, might not be computer savvy, might not know what a podcast is? There's this wonderful new way of connecting with people who are isolated by using old-fashioned technology called the telephone. And I'm talking about Senior Centers Without Walls. So with Senior Centers Without Walls, anybody can dial in and listen to a program, whether it's an arts program, somebody talking about gardening, bird watching, somebody giving financial advice, seminars, or our podcast. So this is actually happening in a couple of communities in Ontario right now. It's wonderful because that one of our goals is not to have a barrier with participation. We want to reach people, and actually those people that are most at risk are seniors who are most isolated. So we're really excited about this new phenomenon of the Senior Centers Without Walls. The thing is that if our show, which is based in Grey Bruce and has people talking and commenting on the issues from Grey Bruce, what do you do about somebody who is in Grimsby and listening? Let's say they're dialing in Grimsby to their local senior center that's having the Senior Centers Without Walls. How can we have? What could we do to make it a more personal experience and a more local experience?
I have an
So
idea.
go ahead.
I have an idea. Why don't the people who are organizing the event in that community invite an expert from that community to come and be their guest speaker? That's what they do. They come in, and so people who are listening to that phone call can engage in a conversation with somebody from their own locality to ask the questions. And in fact, this has been happening. There are people who are reaching out, asking those questions. And in fact, some people have followed up after their group listening experience to get more information and more support.
Sure. And as there are 5 episodes, there may be 5 different people from the community that would be called upon to volunteer to be the local expert and the local resource person so that people can have this conversation in real time after listening to the audio drama and the expert chat together.
So we've talked a lot. Let's listen to a bit of Granny. So the first clip I'm going to play for you, it's an audio clip from the podcast. And this is where Fred and Doris meet. Fred is looking for a place to live. He is looking for a new seniors center, a seniors residence to move into. And he walks in and he happens to meet Doris. Now, he doesn't recognize her just yet. They're having this conversation. So let's listen in and see what happens. It's slow and loading.
Hey, do you remember that farm? Oh, we had big parties out there, huge bonfires. Remember the musical shows we were in?
Oh, I remember those.
All I want is a room somewhere far away from the cold night air.
I know why I didn't remember you. You were always in a bikini.
Oh.
Well, Doris Davy. Well.
Fred Cutler, star of the Fireside Sing-Alongs. Oh, I had all of your CDs, you know. All us young folks did. And here you are, after all these years.
Just visiting, Doris.
Say,
So there you have Fred and Doris, a lively couple who not only do they recognize each other, but a few sparks begin to fly between them over the course of the episodes. And we follow their story. Fred says, "Who's that woman down at the end of the corridor? I think I know her from somewhere." And Doris says, "Yeah, she used to be in the musical society with us." Well, whatever happened with her? So Doris then tells a story. Now, you heard Doris and Fred singing. Well, Doris singing in that clip. The play has a lot of music in it. It has a lot of songs that the musical society would have sung and a lot of songs that seniors will know. They're popular songs from back in the day. In some cases, those songs were given new lyrics by the company that was pulling it together. And in fact, Cora Taylor wrote quite a number of new ones. I'm sorry, I'm not apparently being heard very well. So I'll try to speak up. Let me know if you can't hear me. So there is music throughout. There's the lovely relationship between Doris and Fred, and that creates light and energy that drives the stories. So then they tell a story about a friend who has abuse, but it is told through those characters. And we'll listen to one of the stories that gets told about Mickey Malarkey and her sister Mary Beth. Mickey has dementia. She is living with her sister Mary Beth. Mary Beth has to go to work.
going back to...
Oops, that's not it.
Coffee, good to the last drop. No. Give me that coffee. Oops. Oh, look, you're spilling. Oh, there's no time for this. I can clean it up. See, it's okay. Just sit down and watch the TV with me. Where's that remote thingy? No, I can't. Why not? Why are you pulling me? It's Tuesday. I have to get to work, and you need to get in your bedroom. But I just got out of the bed. Get up.
So,
coffee. Good.
whoops. So people will have heard that. The story continues, and then let's listen to a piece of the expert chat that follows this. What can we do when we know that somebody, when we suspect that maybe somebody is being mistreated, what can we do? So this is Sandra Hong from Alzheimer's Society, Grey Bruce, offering her thoughts.
And years of the community stepping up for Mickey, that, oh, I've noticed that Mary Beth seems to be quite stressed, and, I'd like to come over, maybe, come over with some muffins and sit down and have some coffee and muffins with Mary Beth and Mickey about their situation. We have to think about Mickey's cognitive ability, where she is in her dementia progression.
So she's speaking here, but then within a group setting, you bring in your own resources. There are a number of ways that we can listen to this podcast. As David said, it can be on your own. It could be through a Senior Centers Without Walls group, but it can also be through a group that is meeting online, where they are really joining virtually, just as we are today. So those are the different ways that we can meet. And David's going to walk you through how to organize an event like this.
Sure. And sorry, Joan, your volume went down again for some weird technical reason. Anyways, so how to organize a group granny program. The first thing is to get in touch with us, and we will give you some of the pointers that we used when we created the podcast. You can get in touch with us, send us an email. I'll put our email in the chat. But it's basically to think who in our community is actively working to prevent elder abuse. Who are our resources? Who are our allies in the community? Those are the people that we want on board. And we have a list of for each episode of who we used when we created the podcast, and suggestions for who you could reach out to. In terms of getting in touch with the Senior Centers Without Walls, perhaps that doesn't happen in your community yet, but I know that there is an Ontario-wide organization that wants to see that happening more and more, and they would be happy to help you get that started. It's really, really quite simple in terms of the technical setup for listening to a podcast through Senior Centers Without Walls. People who are not very tech savvy have been managing quite well just down the road from us. So it's wonderful that there don't seem to be a lot of obstacles to this way of getting the word out. Anything else,
So
Joan?
then, once you have your hosts, if you could go back just a moment with the slide, you can do a test run with the method that you plan to use, whether
Right.
it's Zoom, whether it's in phone, or whether it's in person. Collect all of the information materials that you need for your audience members. Prepare a list of resource contacts for the audience. That's really important to have. And promote the podcast series to your members and to the community at large. Next slide, please. And it's really important when you're promoting this event that you let people know that it is about the prevention of elder abuse, and it's about promoting support. Make sure that they know that it's an audio drama, like a radio drama, and that the situations could be worrying to some people, and that there will be support people there at the event. And we have a list of other support people that you can get in touch with.
Yeah.
Then you listen to the podcast with all of your members and leave time for question and answer so that they can get the support that they need.
So it's really about connecting people with the resources that they need, should they need them, or giving them the information on how to get in touch with these resources, because as we all live in community, many eyes and ears are a good thing. And somebody who is listening to the podcast might think, this reminds me of somebody that could use this information. If it's not for me, I could pass it along to somebody who is in need. So there is this ripple effect that can happen, and hey, that's a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful thing about being in community, that we can look after each other, and that these resource people, that is why they're there. They're there to help and assist us.
What do you think? Do you think I could play a little clip of Wrinkles? If I can find it?
Sure.
Okay. So David, can you talk about the public service announcements that we created?
Sure. So, to raise awareness about the podcast and about elder abuse and about where to go to get help, we were able to create 3 public service announcements, or PSAs, using clips from the podcast, just tiny, tiny little PSAs that were run on our local radio station and on the network that they're affiliated with. It's another way of getting the word out about the issue of elder abuse. It's an issue that people often don't want to talk about, which is why it's important to talk about it, to get the word out.
So one of those PSAs has that little piece of Mickey Malarkey and her sister Mary Beth talked about physical abuse and where to contact to get help. I'm going to play you a little bit from Wrinkles here. It's a short sampler.
And Wrinkles is the podcast, is the play that deals with elder abuse in the Indigenous community.
Just borrowing some. Mom was never home. Remember, asshole?
You hit him with a bag of meat? No one respects elders anymore. Sometimes I need help. Somebody to fix this and that.
And you've already paid for a year and a half? $9,000?
It sounds like fraud.
I felt so sorry for that old man. A bunch of boys went into his house and almost killed him.
Pray for my man. He had a stroke. Here's your medicine. This one's for the stroke. I'll give you 2 tonight, my honey, okay?
As my family became dysfunctional, I started talking to the Creator at the end of each day.
Zogman no ki mi wa misho.
We love you, Grandma. We love you, Grandpa.
So that is, we're at the beginning of producing that when it will be available in the fall. So what I'd like to do now is just to open the floor for questions and answers and turn it over to our hosts to lead us through that part of today's session.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was wonderful, everyone. I really enjoyed that. So we've got a couple questions. So if you could address potentially how can you address the deaf or hard of hearing community through podcasts?
With golly, that's something that we're going to be doing with the next program that we have coming out. Within the podcast for Wrinkles, we haven't done that. But if you are doing a Zoom gathering and you're listening to Granny together, you could have somebody like Sheila here be one of your guests and sign while everybody is listening.
Absolutely. Wonderful answer. Next question is...
Good question.
Very good question, and so relevant today. As everyone here today is aware, we always make ASL interpreters available on our webinars and see it as a very beneficial for the attendees. Next question, and very relevant, great question. How could the podcast be used for ethnocultural communities, immigrants, older adult communities with very limited English?
David.
Sure. So one size does not fit all.
Mm-hmm.
Granny was developed for a specific community.
Mhm.
There are certain things that are applicable that are universal, others aren't at all. I guess the answer is how do we address the issues in different communities that are different from the ones in Grey Bruce? That's why Wrinkles, we're excited about having Wrinkles go out, through the Indigenous network of communities. That's a really good question as well. And I think that maybe the answer is we need to do a new show working with people from that particular community that might not be represented in Granny.
Mhm. Another
That takes a while.
Yeah.
But
Another way is to use Granny as a stepping off point. Oh, this is, this episode is similar to something that goes on in my community. It is really different, but it is similar, and looking at the similarities and then talking about what you can do.
And in the case of this question, I feel also if it's just in regards to the limited English, we would encourage the facilitators or the organizers to have a translator, so then the attendees would be able to understand. Wonderful answers to that question, and maybe a little bit thought-provoking, right? Is engaging different communities in upcoming podcasts. One last question. How long would a Zoom gathering take for a group who meets twice a month? So I guess they're wanting to know a typical length of these podcasts.
Sure. They're about a half an hour each, roughly, give or take. And so when you have room for your own community feedback session, maybe it's 45 minutes long, however long you normally might have a program going on. And I know that they vary between a half an hour and an hour in length. So whatever is comfortable for your group.
But the podcasts themselves are clocking around half an hour. I think an hour is kind of a sweet spot for being in front of a screen.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm aware of our limited time today. So we are at 1:55. So I will close out the Q&A portion, and my colleague can take over offering the resources.
And I'm also going to put in a couple of links to the podcast if you want to listen to it, and our website to get more information about what we do.
So the senior safety line is across Ontario, 1-866-299-1011. The service is available any time of day, 365 days of the year. There are live counselors there. There are people who are trained. Not all the questions that come in to this line have to do with I'm experiencing an abusive situation. Sometimes it's people who know someone else who has been abused, or they just want some resources, and they can call in too. If you have any questions about a senior's safety, call that number. And it doesn't matter what language you have. There are over 200 languages represented there, so you can get help. You can also access it online at that particular awhl.org/seniors.
Great, thank you, Joan. And thank you both, Joan and David, and our translators for an excellent presentation today as well. Just some other resources that if people are doing this in their communities and they are not sure what resources are available, you could also search through the 211 database or our website as well. We're also producing a new resource that will be posted with this webinar on elder abuse resources within the province of Ontario, more provincial organizations and services that will help people direct, if they're doing this podcast, that they can have handy to use as a resource for directing people to get information and support services. Just to reiterate around reporting, because we find that that does come up in a lot of our discussions about mandatory reporting or what people's role and responsibility is. So in long-term care and retirement homes, there is a mandated responsibility to report abuse, either to the long-term care action line or the retirement home regulatory authority. So depending on where someone resides. The only individuals who do not have to report are residents themselves within those facilities. This is just a listing as well of other supports, the home and community care, which again is across Ontario for people to connect for home support services. The Alzheimer's Society and also family services for those that live in Toronto. They also have a seniors elder abuse program and support counseling service. And the 519 who has a seniors program for 2S LGBT older adults as well. And then for legal supports, we know that that's a question for people that comes up in some of these presentations, whether it's financial abuse through the podcast or physical abuse, whatever the podcast topic is, legal supports is also a question that arises. So we encourage people to either reach out to the Advocacy Center for the Elderly, which is a specialized service through legal aid, or the Law Society Referral Service, which can provide 30 minutes of free legal advice to individuals, or the South Asian Legal Clinic, which is similar to the Advocacy Center, but support the South Asian community, as well as the Public Guardian Trustee's Office and the Human Rights Tribunal if there's a situation around human rights. And then lastly, around policing supports, to reach out to your local police department. Many local regional police officers or police departments have officers who are dedicated to support seniors, whether that's a senior support officer, a vulnerable person coordinator. They may have different titles, but their role is to support seniors. So if you're calling, ask if there is someone that has that dedicated position that can support. We know if there's any emergency, always telling people to call 911, and you can report anonymously to seniors, the Crime Stoppers line as well. And as I mentioned before, this new tool resource will be out shortly. And we also have other resources on our website that we encourage people to go and check out as well. Again, just our short survey people can complete after the presentation today. And to contact, there's Joan's contact information for Sheeter. I know that came up. They also have a Facebook page that you can reach out to. There was a comment or a question about the cost for the program. It is free, is not Joan and David, for people to access? Yes. Oh, Joan, you're muted.
Sorry, yes, it's free. You can make a donation if you would like to, and in the pamphlet that you would get, it has a link to that, and also on our website.
There is a 4-page outline that David and Joan have prepared, and I will post that along with the recording onto our website, and you'll get a link to that after I believe that's one day after the event, just as a follow-up to give you the link to access the webinar, and I'll put the resources in there as well. And here's our contact information. If you have further questions or you have further comments, you'd like to reach out to us, please feel free. We're also on social media, and Laura, who's joined us today, tries to keep everybody apprised of our upcoming events. And lastly, before we leave, I just want to encourage people, as Laura had in her background, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day is arising on June 15th, which is coming quicker than we can think. We're also hosting a National Elder Abuse Forum on that day. So just be aware that we will be hosting that. If you're not registered already, we'll be announcing our speakers later next week. So we'll be speakers from across Canada speaking to the issue of human rights of older adults. Our theme this year is Rights Don't Get Old. We know that that's a prominent issue, and I know it's embedded into many of your podcasts that you have developed as well. So again, thank you both David and Joan for joining us today, and Sheila and Danica for our ASL interpreters. We wish everyone a great day and we hope to see you at our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.